So, start off with variables. We have 5 main data types that we usually use on a daily basis. Those are int, num, for example, 5. This represents whole numbers. It represents both positive and negative numbers, as long as they're whole. It doesn't allow you to pass in numbers that have like decimal spaces. And it has a certain limit. I don't know it out of the top of my head, but there's a limit to int. After int, we have double. This one allows you to basically use the decimal space. For example, 5.5. You can put as many decimal places as you want. Normally, some people also use a D at the end, but I usually don't use it. You also have float, which is mostly the same, just that it has more floating point like issues. You can. I'll leave some documentation in the description for it, but essentially, by norm, double is the most used, float is the second after. You also have char, which represents a character. So just see, let's say it's the C character. It's represented with this symbol here, because there's a difference between quotes and whatever this symbol is called. I don't remember the exact name, but there's a difference. One represents string, the other represents characters. Okay, then you have the boolean, which is just a true or false. This is one of the variables that's mostly used in conditionals, like an if statement. So it's true. Yeah, it's true. And string my text. This one I already showed in a different tutorial. It's just basically holding a string inside. And you can do stuff like putting that string interpolation. No, string literal, that's the term. And then putting a variable inside of it. Like, if I want to put my double inside of it, and then say I want to use the F2, for example, this will round up to 2 decimal places. I'll show it with the console writeline. Console.writeline str. Now if I debug this, it will round to the closest decimal space. There we go. 5.51. Which, if we look at this, yeah, it rounds either up or down, depending. So, there we go. So, next part of our introduction to programming is typecasting. For example, what happens if you try to cast int to a string? Like, how do you do it? There are a few ways. One can already be seen in our string, where I actually casted a double, but also works for int, by just putting it in a string literal. Another way, like, you can just do, for example, let me see, console writeline num.toString. That's a simple conversion to string. Another way it's accepted, writeline, you put the data type you want to convert to before the variable. For example, I want to convert it to a string, num. Actually, in this case, it doesn't work that well, because it doesn't know how to cast directly. What does work is, if I try to cast the double into an int, when they are the same base type of numbers, yeah, it works as casting. So If I now, for example, try to do this, it will show first the hello world, it will show num.toString, which basically is 5, and the roundup of the double into an int. As I explained, ints are whole numbers. They don't allow you to have the decimal points. So because of that, it basically rounds to the nearest number. And basically that's it. Another way you can try to convert something into a different data type is, for example, if you have a string that has a value inside of it, say, for example, a string containing true, you can do a bool.parse or bool.tryparse. Essentially, you can do something like a string bool value equals true. You can then do it safely by saying if bool.tryparse, you are trying to parse, in case of it gets an error while parsing, it will return a false. So if bool.tryparse of our bool value out var result, basically you're saying that this is the outcome of the conversion to boolean, because if we check, the tryparse returns a bool, either true or false, which means I successfully converted this into the type you want, or I failed to convert. So if it successfully converted, it will assign to whatever I put in the out variable, which in this case should be true. So I can just say result on the console write line. This will output true. And there we go. That's essentially the basics of typecasting in C#. Why you use Writeline, not log? Because Console.Log, that's Java, not C#. C# needs Console.WriteLine or Console.Write. Write is for jumbling up everything in the same line. For example, if I put Console.Write test, then duplicate it a few times, maybe put a space in one of them, it will put everything in the same line. There we go. Console write line is basically write this on a separate line. Okay, I thought it's the same here. Nice to know. Yeah, that's one of my issues at the time when I was learning C#. Knowing Java, I kept messing up with the console because they have the same base class. It's console, but the methods are different. C# doesn't have log. Okay, now that we've got typecasting out of the way, let me explain what conditions are in C#. For example, we have this if statement here that we coded with while I was explaining the typecasting with the tryparse. This basically says if the condition inside these parentheses matches, is true, you will do what I have declared under it. You can also put an else under it to do a different thing, like console.writeLine failed to parse value. Now imagine I do this. Instead of true, I'll have like, let me see, 1.5. I can also do an else if statement, which basically is these two grabbed together. Instead of chaining else ifs inside of each other, you can use the else if statement, which is basically like this. Let's say double.tryparse bool value. I need to rename that variable out var double result. And there we have it. Now, before I go, a simple trick for you to rename metanames, variables, whatever you want. Control-R in most IDEs, it will open up like a prompt like this, where you can just rename whatever you want. Like value. Simple. It's renamed every reference to it, including its declaration. So yeah, basically that's it. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down what you'd like me to do next in the tutorials. I'll be sure to listen to it. And yeah, I'll see you on the next tutorial.